Hey guys, how's it going? Today we're going to talk about the differences and the pros and cons and the wholesaling vacant land and houses. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Let's talk about the top 4 differences in wholesaling land and houses and which option or which type of wholesaling works better for you. So the 4 topics we're going to talk about are marketing, the due diligence, buyers, and profit. So when we talk about marketing, what I mean by marketing is marketing to sellers. So, you could be texting, sending mailers, and all that kind of stuff. So in general, your cost doesn't really matter because it's going to be the same for land and the same for houses. You're going to send mailers, you're going to send text, cold call, all that stuff costs the same. Where the difference comes in is that the housing wholesaling is a little bit more, I guess, saturated. I don't like that word. I don't think anything is oversaturated, but there's more people doing wholesaling of houses than there is of land. And there's a reason for that. But, so the housing wholesaling, when you text those sellers, most likely they have been contacted by multiple wholesalers before you. So a lot of times they're going to be a little bit irritated. So you have to get creative to get those properties under contract, or you just hit them at the right time. So you just got lucky because you stay consistent, which is consistency is key in any kind of marketing anyway. And when you contact landowners, they're a little bit less irritated. They have been contacted by wholesalers most likely, but maybe not as many, or some haven't been contacted at all. So you would be the first one, which has happened to me. So a lot of times you get to be the first guy, the first gal that would make an offer on that property. So that's awesome. But if I would have to rate which one is easier, I would go with land, and I believe that land is easier to market to sellers than it is on houses. The number 2 happens after you actually got the property under contract, or you're trying to get it under contract. I guess it's that time of period. It's called due diligence. So you have to make sure, for example, let's talk about land first. When you're doing land, you have to make sure the lot is buildable. Is it residential? Is it commercial? What kind of lot are you trying to wholesale? Obviously, you could wholesale residential, commercial. Most likely, you'll be trying to wholesale residential to start with. You have to make sure the lot is buildable. You have to make sure if it's residential, commercial, depending on what you're trying to do. And I would say that it is actually many things that you have to do with land when you're trying to do due diligence on land. You have to make sure it doesn't have flood zones. You have to make sure it doesn't have wetlands. What's the buildable part of the land? What are the setbacks? Is it buildable in the way that, is the size good enough for that city or the county to deem that property buildable? There's many things that can go in that, and it's actually not that difficult to find that information, but a lot of wholesalers don't know how to find that information. So they just kind of deem it as difficult and just go on. But the good part about it is that you actually don't really have to go to the property if you don't want to. A lot of times it's much easier, for example, to virtual wholesale land than it is to wholesale houses, because you don't have to be there as much. You don't have to go inside the property. So because let's say you're wholesaling a small vacant lot, a lot of times, especially if it's in a bigger city, you can see pretty much the entire lot over Google Pictures, over Google View. You take that little yellow guy, you drop it on the street, and then you can see the entire street, and it actually works out really well, especially if you don't want to drive all the way to the property, if there's no need for it. But when it comes to houses, it's a little bit of a different story. When it comes to houses, you have to make sure you get to the property, at least you, your partners, or you have boots on the ground if you're virtual wholesaling, that has to go inside the property, make sure the property, is whatever the seller described it is, and, you have to make kind of an inspection. You can get an inspector to inspect it, but if you didn't want to and do it yourself, you have to make sure you check, obviously the major things, AC, roof, whatever. You can't really do anything with electric or plumbing. You can ask the seller. That's as much as you can pretty much do without doing like a proper inspection. Obviously, you actually have to have the time. The seller has to have the time. They have to let you inside the house, which I think is the most difficult part about doing due diligence, is that because, you try to build rapport while talking to the seller. However, it gets a little bit difficult when it comes to the point that you say, hey, I want to come to your house and take a look at it. A lot of them feel uncomfortable, especially because of COVID right now. That just adds to it. Especially, I've had, for example, older ladies that didn't really want me to let inside their house. It took me a while to build a rapport for them. They had some other family members to come in at the same time as I was coming in, just to make sure everything's fine. And that will happen. So I think that's a big factor when you're doing due diligence on the houses. There's a lot more that can go wrong, and the sellers are less willing to show you the property. When it comes to land, they're like, yeah, just go ahead and take a look at it. Go drive out there, whatever you want to do. Sometimes they want to show it to you. Sometimes they don't care. Sometimes you can just go. So I believe due diligence, even though there's some stuff to be done in land, there are obviously certain things that has to be done with the house too. But I just believe it's much easier to do with land. So I'm going to give this one to land as well. All right, so part number 3, we're coming to buyers. Okay, so you got the property on the contract. Now you have to market it to buyers to assign the contract. This time we're going to start with houses. So when you do a house, and let's say you have a property on the contract for a good price, that's a very main factor in this. So if you have a property on a good price, you're not going to really have any issues finding a buyer for it. I mean, there are some areas in the country, in United States, that is not as good as other areas. For example, since I'm in Central Florida, Tampa Bay area, there's a lot of buyers. So if you have a good price on the house, finding a buyer for it will be pretty much no problem at all. And you can have your own buyer list. And even if you don't have your own buyer list, for example, here in Tampa Bay, we have a very strong community of like Facebook investors. So you post it on a couple of Facebook investor groups, and you will have a lot of emails that they want the property. So I believe marketing the house to buyers is actually very, very simple, as long as you have a good price. But that good price goes for land and houses as well, so it doesn't really matter. When we talk about land, so land, there's only 3 types of people that will buy land. There are builders, contractors that that will actually build a spec home, that will buy land. There are land investors, which is your, I would say, number 2 buyers. I think you want to wholesale to spec builders, because they will pay a little bit better price, because they're actually going to utilize that land to build something on it and make profit. So they're willing to pay a little more. When it comes to land investors, they're not as willing to pay as much, because what they're going to do is they're going to try to profit just like you trying to profit. So they're going to flip it. So sometimes they will be flipping it. Sometimes they will be holding on to it for a long time, doing finance, owner financing or something like that. So, the land investors are your second option. And your third option are retail buyers, which could be paying more than the other 2, but it's just a little bit more difficult process. So you have 3 types of buyers, but the problem is it's very hard to get a hold of retail buyers with land, because I used to market all over Facebook Marketplace, but Facebook Marketplace changed a little bit, and now it's harder to really post land for sale. So you can have houses for sale, but there's no really like a place you can post a land for sale. You can pretend like it's a house. It's a long story, but so it's not as easy to reach the regular audience, regular people with those land deals that you have. With that, what you could do is get, for example, banded signs and advertise to regular people, because you cannot put it on MLS. You cannot do anything like that because you're not allowed to. So it's harder to reach the retail buyers. Your other good option is to have in realtors that know a lot of people, that reach out to them all the time, and they could help you out to an extent. So that's an option, but it gets a little difficult talking when we talk about retail buyers. Land investors and builders. Land investors most likely will be on Facebook, and they will be on Marketplace. They will be on Facebook investor groups. So it's not that difficult to get a hold of them. When it comes to builders, there are some that are online. They're looking for properties, but some are not. And some are a little bit old school in the way that they don't really go on Facebook to look for land, because it's not a common practice. In the way that I've seen some areas, for example, where I'm at, I see some builders that go on investor groups and they try to find land for sale, which is, that's fine. But when it comes to some other areas that I've been to, I have not seen many builders going on Facebook and stuff like that to actually find land. So I believe it kind of depends on your area, so you have to fill it out, you know, post a deal or two and just see if any builders bite and give them, their information, get their email. Even if that property doesn't work for them, you can work with them in the future. So I believe that's kind of how you should approach it. Or you have to market directly to them by text blasting multiple when you find land investors and builders, and get their phone numbers and text blast all of them through, you can find them through PropStream and stuff like that. So I believe when it comes to buyers, I believe it's so much more simple to do it with houses than it is with land. So I'm gonna give this to houses. I believe it's much easier to market to buyers with houses than it is with land. And number 4 is probably the one that everyone is the most curious about, is like, where can you make more money? Where's your profit better? Is it houses or land? Let's talk about it. So land and houses, the difference is that with houses, you make more money on average. I don't say that I've made more money sometimes wholesaling land than a house, but on average, you make more money on a house, on one house, than you make on one land. So the way it works is that your spread on a house, you can a lot of times lower the price on the house you're buying from a seller because of multiple issues they're having with the house. So, you know, bad roof, bad electric, plumbing, all the other stuff. So you can lower the price on the house much easier, negotiate it lower, so that you can have a bigger spread. So most likely you'll make a little more money. When it comes with land, it's a little more difficult because there's not a lot you can be like, oh, this is bad with this land. There are some things, you know, for example, that it needs clearing, or part of it is in flood zone, or where it is, how far away it is from highway, all kinds of stuff. So you can do some things with that, but it's not as much as when it comes to houses. And a lot of times that landowners are not very in distress. There's not as much distress as houses. The reason being is that, yes, there is regular distress, like, you know, like divorce, or, you know, somebody passing away and the land being just, you know, somebody inherited the land, they don't know what to do with it, or liens and back taxes. But that can happen with a house too, but house has additional distresses on top of that. You know, the house being, I don't know, like having leaks, having certain issues that they don't want to deal with. So there are more reasons for them to sell the house than there is to sell land. So that's why you can get it for a little bit of a better price. And like I said, because there is more buyers for houses than there is for land, you have more competition, and people are willing to bet a little more to get the property than it is with land. With land, a lot of times they know that you might be, you know, they might be the 5 people that will buy this property from you. When it comes to houses, there'll be, you know, tens, almost 100, I don't know, depends on what kind of property it is. You can have a lot of buyers for a house than compared to land. So you have a little bit more leverage when you're assigning a house than you're assigning a land. But with land, is that the good part is that you have the volume, so you can get a lot of land because it's easier to get it with a seller. But for that, you have to have a good buyer list. So they're kind of equal it out. But if I would have to give a point to someone, I think houses have better profit margins, and you can make more money on houses than it is on land. If you do the right way, if you get the marketing right, and if you are able to acquire properties. When you're starting off, maybe land will be much easier, so I would suggest maybe trying that out first. But with houses in general, if you go with houses, you'll be able to make more money with it. So like you guys can see, there's 2 points and 2 points. One is not really better than the other. They're just different. You know, there's different things. You can still make a lot of money with land. You can still make a lot of money with houses. It doesn't really matter. It's just different way to approach it. I would say if you're starting off, land is a little bit less hustle in the way, at least to find the deal. So you can at least get yourself in a position that you're comfortable with, that you can find the deal. And then from that point, work your way through and get houses and stuff like that. So I would say start with land, finish with houses, and then, you know, from here you go farther on, you know, multifamily, all that kind of stuff. But in general, I don't think there is one better than the other. They both work. And, you know, you just have to figure out what works the best in your market. Because some markets, land is not very desirable, and but houses are always going to be desirable. So I would say some properties, some counties, some states don't have really a lot of land buyers. So if you wanted to stay away from that and just go to houses, you can do that as well. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this was informational enough for you. Leave a comment down below if you have any other questions. Please leave a like to the video if you did enjoy it, and subscribe to the channel. We'll always drop different kind of knowledge on you here. And as always, guys,